Welcome to the Estates Made Simple podcast. And my name is Gordon Vanderleek. I'm here with my co-host, Jenna Carvello. We are on a mission to simplify the world of estate administration. And we love talking about this topic because we think this is one way that we can give necessary information and tools to executors to be able to do their job. So thanks for watching us or listening in. Today's topic is going to be appointing a professional executor. If you want a recap of some of the considerations that go into choosing an executor, listen to our prior episode on that topic. But we're going to drill down a little bit, I think, today and talk about what about kind of the corporate executor, the professional executor, somebody who's doing it for a living, the trust companies that are out there. So Jenna, why don't you kick that off? I know this is the world you live in, right? In terms of helping people navigate the choices of a professional executor, and that was a little bit of your occupational history, right? Having worked for a local trust company. So I think you may have some opinions about this one.
So yes, a professional executor is somebody that does this for a living. They're hired to act as an executor for your estate, and it's typically offered through trust companies. There are 16 trust companies in Canada that act as professional executor. They act as executor. They also can act as trustee for your trust stemming from your will, and power of attorney if you need an attorney to act under that document as well. They're licensed, they're highly regulated, and they have processes and procedures in place to make sure that they're running through the various stages of the estate administration and tackle every step that needs to be done. Not forgetting, the utilities that need to be updated, or the aerial plan points that need to be transferred to a beneficiary. So all those small things and also the larger things are handled appropriately with a professional executor. Some professional executors are better suited at managing complex estates, managing assets in other jurisdictions, or perhaps trusts with disabled beneficiaries. And so there are some differences between them, which, as I mentioned in earlier podcasts, that's what I do, is helping clients navigate those decisions. But professional executor, they're there for a reason, and I think clients should consider them when appropriate.
Yeah, they're a great option. Not a fit for every family, but they're a fit for a lot of families. And part of the consideration is, does that make sense for you? Just adding on that, Jenna, was that what I see when I go to continuing education, guess what? I see those trust officers showing up to that continuing education, right? Because the company is paying them to stay on top of changes in the law, best practices. There's internal training. So you're buying that expertise. We talk about a professional. Well, they're professional. They take their job seriously and they stay on top of things. And an individual, you might think, doesn't have all that training and experience. So you're purchasing that expertise, and that's ongoing, right? Over the course of the administration of the estate.
Yeah. I think this is a great topic, and let's dive into when to choose a professional executor, Gord. I think, talking about the complexity of the family is one of the most important considerations. Would you agree?
Yeah, and that's where we see the scenario for a professional executor come into play. Maybe just an opening comment before we get into that. Sometimes I hear from my clients when I start talking, I'm sort of sensing this may be a good fit, and I start easing the conversation towards, well, maybe you should consider it. Oftentimes the response is, oh, but they're so expensive, right? And yes, trust companies exist to make a profit. They're not doing it for free, and they're going to charge something. But I just wanted to say to our listeners and our viewers that start with the assumption that you're going to pay somebody to do this. Like, maybe somebody would do it for free, but that's not a realistic expectation. And you should expect that the executor is going to charge compensation. While there might be slight differences between what a family member would do and what a professional, executor is going to do, it's not like one is free and one is uber expensive, right? So I think in reality, the cost differential is not as big as maybe some people think as an assumption going in. And so I think it's helpful to consider that, they play a role in certainly in certain circumstances and in appropriate circumstances. And as we were talking about, let's move into that. The complex family situations are oftentimes where they play a role. Um, if there's just some families just require that independence, a neutral third party, if you will, or independent party to step in the family dynamics. If you're thinking, you've got adult children and they're the ones you might be considering. Well, what if they don't get along, or there's unique aspects to that relationship? With the estate just monitor along smoother if there was a neutral person in. And I think that's a consideration. So if you have complex business assets, if you have, any sort of complexity, you think it's a good consideration to think about a professional executor, because they're good at this stuff, right? They will have seen it all before, right? So in that context, if you give it to a family member to do it, they may have no idea where to start. So there's already an advantage that you're buying that professionalism and that experience to be able to handle that complex situation, and they can amass a team. If you're running a business and they gotta go bring a bunch of people in there to help manage that business, that may overwhelm a family member to do, but it's something they can handle because they're equipped from that. They've probably done it before. And they have ongoing training on this and capacity to be able to handle that. So certainly, if you have beneficiaries living abroad, would be a consideration. Some dysfunctionality in the family says, well, maybe it'd be better to have somebody independent do it. If somebody is been cut out of the will and they're gonna make life miserable for the other person, right? Is the choice of the executor a flashpoint for inherent conflict, either between them or within the family? You neutralize that by bringing a trust company in. An example that comes to mind on this, Jenna, was years ago. I remember having an estate and there was, I don't know, 5 or 6 kids. It turned out mom named kind of the black sheep of the family. She liked the black sheep and trusted the black sheep, if I can use that terminology. But right away, everybody else was starting from the position of being disagreeable. And they just would fight every little thing, even the smallest of decisions. Well, we don't agree. And what about this? And what about that? And the person came to my office completely stressed out. And I said, okay, we can go to court and we can get the court to help on managing decisions on the administration of the estate, but that gets expensive and time consuming. And what about a trust company? Loved the idea. He was willing to get out. And in that situation, we brought in a professional executor, and all the arguments stopped.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, it had been going on for about 20 months, and the estate got wrapped up in 6 months.
Wow.
And that was just a bit of a dramatic example, because really what was happening is it wasn't even that the other people just couldn't bring themselves to agree with him because he was the black sheep of the family, or there was some history there. I probably didn't even know it all, or that was disclosed to me. But they could pick a fight with their sibling, but they're not going to pick a fight with somebody who's coming in independent, just doing their job. Right. And it just neutralized everything. And then it just brought the temperature down on all the discussions. And we got rid of all that baggage. There was apparently a ton of baggage on that decision making. And I thought, you know what? They paid a price for that, but it would have been a heck of a lot cheaper than if they had paid me to go to court, and everybody lawyers up would be exponentially more expensive than what they would have paid to the trust company. They got their inheritance quicker, which they could then invest and now do something with. So, getting back to my opening comment, you got to look at the cost in context. Man, I've seen some of the invoices coming from law firms that get in estate administration, or on estate litigation rather, and it's enormous. It can just really, really escalate. So it's sometimes worth bringing in that neutral third party.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think another good example of the complex family dynamics is if you have a spousal trust in your will, and you have maybe an adult child from a previous relationship acting as an executor, and they're going to be managing the spousal trust, making decisions of when to encroach some of the capital out to that spouse, which could be a conflict of interest, because when the spouse passes away, that adult child's going to be a beneficiary. And so in that situation, it's very it is a very sticky situation that a lot of people don't consider, because there's that conflict of interest that is inherent in appointing a beneficiary, of the trust when the
Yeah.
adult passes away.
Yeah, be a remainderman
Mhm.
beneficiary, right? So
Yeah,
then now the spouse is second. Oh, you're just saying that because you want to keep more for yourself when I die, right? And you're not
right.
letting
Yeah,
me go on this vacation or give me money that I need for living, or you're objecting to the kind of nursing home I want to go in because it's out of self-interest, right? You eliminate all that if it's just independently made by an objective third party. Yeah, no,
yeah.
good choice on there. And certainly long-term trust is where we talk about having that, not so much on the executor role, but then also on the trustee role is important. So you got to look at both of those. How did you structure the estate plan, and do we have the right people to carry out the job?
Right, yeah. And something you touched on before is the complex estate assets. The complexity of your estate will govern who you choose to appoint as an executor. And trust companies, as you mentioned, are very well suited at handling complex matters. They've done everything. This is what they do each and every day, is administer estates. So they're used to navigating the different decisions and different variables that need to be considered when getting rid of those complex estate assets. Just a couple of examples. When I was a professional executor, we had to manage an operating company. The deceased died much too young, and he still had a company that needed to be handled. There's also assets that we needed to deal with in Costa Rica and various countries in Europe, where if you've never dealt in those jurisdictions, it's very difficult to know where to start and who to contact and which professionals you need. So the complexity of the estate assets definitely is a main decision factor when choosing whether a professional is appropriate.
Yeah. And touching on a point that we had made in the last episode, do they have the time? I mean, just that example that you give, dealing with Costa Rica and business assets and all the rest of it, is that going to overwhelm a family member? Trust companies are set up for that, right? They can amass a team, bring in the right professionals to be able to manage and handle that. Or if you go, we got assets in all these different jurisdictions, they can reach out to the expertise, regarding the cabin in Manitoba. Well, you can call the local, of the trust company, can reach out and say, well, we got somebody who's an expert on the ground who knows how to deal with the cabin in Manitoba, knows the lawyers, and can move quickly with regard to dealing with that asset. So yeah, I think you certainly want to be mindful of the asset base, and that could be very much in favor of the professional executor. What I see a lot of times in my practice, of course, is the liability. And people, sometimes I have to represent executors who get sued by beneficiaries. And you look back and go, they're well-intended, they're good people, but they made a mistake, right? And sometimes it's because they didn't know, or they didn't know they had to ask a question. Getting back to our comments in the other episode about decision making, hopefully they would have sought out the right advice, but lots of innocent mistakes can happen, which would give rise to some potential liability. It's not because they're bad people. It's just they go, oh, I didn't think I had to do that. Oh, shoot, I forgot about that. The reality is that all the work of the executor is personal responsibility. You can't sort of hide behind a corporate veil or just say, somehow it's sheltered. So you accept that responsibility. Well, now you get sued. And if the court says, well, you're responsible and you have to repay the estate based on some damages that you caused, well, now your retirement's in jeopardy. Your RSPs are at risk because, you may have to collapse some of those to put some money back in, going, well, I never signed up for this, right? So one of the ways to say is sometimes, and I'm hearing it more and more, people go, I not only don't want to do it, I just don't want the risk, right? You may be a stage of life where you're trying to minimize your risk. You're at the retirement stage going, I'm not looking to take it on. I'm trying to reduce it because I got to protect my family, right? So it's a good way to say, hey, when you're paying if the professional executor makes a mistake, guess what? They got to own it.
Yeah.
Right.
And they have deeper pockets than, the average person.
Yeah, so that's coming up more and more, and the more complex the assets, the greater the increase that there could be a mistake if with an error in judgment, right?
Yeah.
With regard to that, so yeah, so I think the other certainly we talked about the time frame and being able to manage all the relationships and all the decisions that have to be made. What we're seeing more and more is that, well, life in general is just becoming more complex. right? There's tax implications, financial implications, legal implications, and so just having somebody who's well equipped on that, and this is what they do for a living, is a definite advantage. It's not necessarily for everybody. Um, I'm still, when I draft wills, I'm more often than not making, family members are appointed or friends are being appointed. But the number of corporate appointments or, professional executors I'm appointing statistically is going up,
Yeah.
compared to 10 years ago. And I think a factor is just the complexity and that liability. People they hear more stories. You can make an argument we're getting more litigious, or at least there's more reporting of these sorts of cases, or you hear about estates gone badly, and it can be really stressful for the person involved. So just saying, okay, I'll forego the compensation. I'd rather have the compensation go to somebody else, and it's just a cost of the estate. And then you go, okay, I can sleep better at night knowing, I'm not on the hook for this, that type of thing. So,
Right. Yeah.
okay.
And too, if a corporate executor is appropriate when there's absolutely nobody else to act as well.
Yes.
So your estate may be quite simple, but maybe you don't have family members that are willing to act or friends that are willing to act. Then by default, you should seek out a professional executor who do this each and every day and who will charge a fee. But I mean, you pay a fee to sell your house, you pay a realtor, you obtain insurance, and you pay a fee for insurance. You have an investment advisor, you pay an ongoing fee for that. And so it's something that you should consider in choosing an executor. Is why not pay a fee for this hefty job to do? Because it makes sense when you need professionals in place.
Yeah, and I would say on that, I mean, a couple of aspects here. One would be, if you are an executor and you're kind of saying, yeah, I wish my parent or my brother or sister had thought about this and listened to this episode before they named me, and I really should get a professional executor. I think certainly all the major banks, right, will do agency work, right? Well, they'll come in and help existing executors and support them. So if you like the idea of those services, that doesn't necessarily accomplish the getting you off the hook from a liability perspective, but you can contract out and say, can you help me on an estate? And then they'll do the bulk of the work and come to you to sign off and give you guidance. So there's a little bit of contracting out that can happen. You can't absolve yourself of the liability. I think that's better to sort of name them in the first place. But if you're struggling on this, there are some options on the market, right, where you can go to the trust companies and say, "Can I have some help?" And for the most part, I think they all enjoy that work and take on those assignments, right? Well, it'll help existing executors. The other point I wanted to make was, I always say to clients, I'm kind of a broken record saying, plan for the next 3 to 5 years, because that's a reasonable time period to begin to think about how far ahead you can plan and engage into the future. But just because you've appointed, a professional executor in right now doesn't mean you're locked in, for the rest of your life with that choice. Maybe in 5 years, somebody's in your life who is a better choice, or what becomes complex assets becomes simplified and you don't need the trust company. So think about the season in life you're in and what makes sense for where your family is right now and the composition of your estate assets, and make the decision. But you can always change your mind and take the trust company out in 5 years, but they can play a role at certain seasons of one's life.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah.
And even there's no cost to take the trust company out too, which I think is good.
Yeah, or to appoint them, right?
Yeah.
Typically they're going to want their standard clauses in the will, but that ensures they're willing to serve, and they want you to sign a compensation agreement. But that's not a bad thing, because it's a bit of a hedge against inflation. You lock in at the rates as to when you sign, and if those rates go up, then there's an advantage of doing that. So so like if you say, well, there's sometimes people come and go, yeah, I moved to Canada, I'm the only person here, all my family is in a different country. Well, that would be a reason to say, well, but I still want it done professionally. I don't want to leave a mess for my kids or in terms of dealing with all that. Yeah, some excellent points on that. So I guess to wrap it up, I think maybe the theme for me as I was preparing for this would be, don't dismiss it. I think some people will sort of, oh, no, I can't afford it. Or, no, that, my estate's not big enough for the trust company. Well, those are things to ask and maybe investigate. And maybe there are alternatives, one of the 15 or 16 would be willing to take it on, and it's good for, it has an advantage for you now. So hopefully these are some factors to look at to help you in your decision making about that. And I'd be remiss to say, I'm going to put in a plug for Jenna to say, if you are convinced to say, yes, I need a corporate executor, well, then reach out to Jenna because she can help you pick the corporate, the professional executor, right? And help you through that process because she knows what it's like. She's been there on the inside, and that's what you do, right? You do as part of your, not exclusively, but as part of your work, you help people navigate through this process, which I think is, just a wonderful service and one that people should think about.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, and I think the corporate executors, there's some differences between them, which gives me the opportunity to choose the best one for a
Yeah.
client. So I appreciate the plug, Gordon, and
Okay.
look forward to our discussion next time on the cost of executors and executor compensation.
That's going to be an interesting topic. So until then, stay well and thanks for listening in.
Thank you.